In a remote little town called Falls End, there lived two families, the Edens and the Cougars. They lived to hate one another. Sound familiar? Anyway, Faith was an Eden and Rook was a Cougar. This story begins in the streets, where members of the Eden and Cougar houses had obvious tensions. Their squabble continued as cousins fought cousins, which is quite the opposite stereotype of backcountry America. Rook's cousin, Nick, being the pacifist that he was, attempted to stop the rabble-rousing between the two families. However, Jacob, who is Faith's cousin, would not have it. Herc Drubman, the mayor of the town and only official person in this part of Montana, told these families to quiet down. He needed to beef up his Twitter account for the upcoming general election. So everyone groveled and returned to their houses except for Nick and Jacob, who were too intently staring each other down to realize that everyone else had gone. After they exchanged numbers and parted, Rook's mother came up to Nick, obviously flustered, asking, "Where is my dumbass of a son? Has you seen him?" Nick just shrugged and said, "He's been acting weird. Didn't come up to play skiddly-doop today." They both just scratched their heads and headed towards home. Nick found Rook and sighed. "Rook, Rook, Rook. I know you're lovesick. Who is this girl?" Rook turned to him and said, "'Cause I love a girl so bad I could die." And so that was that. Nick told Rook to watch some porn and forget about her. Joseph Eden, father to Faith, made plans for a mad square dance to take place that night. Saying that about 1 in 4 citizens of Montana could read, the party's bouncer innocently asked for Nick and Rook's help to read the guest list. While reading the list, Nick realized that there were a bunch of hot chicks that would be attending the party, Bobby Joe being one of them, and said to Rook, "It'll be a real good time tonight if we came to that party. Maybe you could get your mind off things." On a side note, Billy Bob, which is Rook and Nick's family friend, tagged along because he couldn't be trusted alone. He had some issues, and no one knows why he butted into the moment that Nick and Rook were having together. But let's not question it. Back to our story. Rook kept sulking over this girl, quite impressively since square dancing shouldn't leave anybody sad. He stopped for a moment as he entered the party and spotted her, the girl he'd only seen in his dreams. Dazzled by her snaggletooth and uneven eyebrows, he was speechless. And she wasn't perfect, but just the picker-upper he'd been looking for. They square danced their hearts away, not knowing that their love at first square had been founded with their opposing family. Even when they realized that they were from opposing household names, their love didn't waver. Jacob, on the other hand, was absolutely furious at the two being together. He stormed off and decided to punch a few things because that'll definitely help things out. Rook said to himself as he left the party, "No! I don't want to leave the party yet." And so he left, but not with his friends. Instead, he decided to stick around and hide in a bush near the dancing stage. Soon thereafter, he set eyes on his true love yet again, but now in private. She was still up there, now slow dancing by herself, murmuring Rook's name as she moved, which must have been quite the sight. Faith believed that she heard her love, and called out to him, "Oh, Rook!" Soon after, the couple met on the stage and started planning their lives together. Things must have gotten a little out of hand, because that night they agreed to marry, and very, very soon. You could say they took things a little too quickly. Rook left the place to find Pastor Jerome. When he arrived at the church, Pastor Jerome concernedly asked Rook, "You look like you haven't got any sleep. Have you been up with Bobby Joe?" Rook responded, "Who's she? Should I know her? Anyway, I'm seeing someone new. Her name is Faith, and we want to get married." The pastor replied, "Who is this girl?" Rook quietly said, "Faith Eden." Pastor Jerome yelled, "Holy shit! What are you doing? Are you trying to get yourself killed?" Rook simply answered, "I just love her." The pastor said, shaking his head, "You love dying is what it sounds like." This went on for a while, but eventually Pastor Jerome agreed to do the ceremony, for only God knows why. Rook sent a letter to Faith that day to say that the coast was clear to marry for that afternoon, which sounds more like a day playing hooky than planning a wedding, but oh well. She was told to meet him at the church. In fact, this part of the story went as planned, and the two were married. An angry Jacob, looking to fight Rook due to his relationship with Faith, ran into Nick and Billy Bob. And for some reason, he decided that since he couldn't find Rook, he would just stab defenseless little Bobby Joe. Miraculously, Rook showed up just too late to save Bobby Joe, but in plenty of time to get revenge on Jacob. He killed Jacob in his rage and ran off hastily. Mayor Herc entered the scene with the heads of both opposing families. Angrily, Herc said, "This is going to kill my campaign. Oh, I mean, sorry for your losses. Since I can't report this incident and hurt my chances as senator, I think that we can all live with the banishing of Rook from our town as punishment." In the middle of her bliss in being married to Rook, Faith learned of her cousin's death. Rather than feeling sad for Jacob, she sobbed about the possibility of never seeing her love again, even though he killed her cousin. I know, it's pretty messed up. Meanwhile, Rook learned from the pastor that he had been banished rather than being prosecuted for murder. Being the dumbass that he was, Rook said, "But no, I know I killed a man and everything, and I could have been put to death for killing a man, but living in the next town over is just too much to ask." Jerome said to him, "Hey, be grateful. Visit her tonight, and then leave." Faith Eden's father, in the midst of these crazy things happening in the family, decided that it was the perfect time to tell Faith that he found the right man for her to marry. And even better, he took a page from Rook's book and planned for a wedding to happen in 3 days. I know what you're thinking. Faith was married 2 times in 4 days? She must have been quite the woman. Rook and Faith spent the night together, and parted as the sun rose. Faith's mother, obviously being out of the loop, planned on telling her daughter of Jacob's death and Rook's exile, but instead decided to happily announce the news of her upcoming wedding. Defiantly, Faith told her father that she wouldn't marry, and runs off to Pastor Jerome to either find a solution to her problem or kill herself. The pastor, in a stroke of misjudgment, told her that he knew a way to make her look dead, so that she wouldn't have to go through with the wedding. I mean, a suicide hotline or something would have been okay, but that's fine too. They went through with their plan, not knowing what would happen next. The next day, Faith was found seemingly dead, and her family, already having done 1 funeral that week and starting to become pros at it, placed her body in the family crypt. The news reached Rook, who the pastor and Faith had forgotten to let know their plan, and so he began his journey back home to grieve and see his lover. When he arrived, Faith was still under the sleeping potion. As he reached the tomb, his heart sank into a depression from the sight of his beloved wife. Out of grief, he decided to overdose on painkillers to be with his lover in the afterlife. Slowly, as he lost his consciousness, Faith regained her own. Confused and terrified, she watched as Rook slipped away. In the heat of the moment, she took her own life with a dagger, because we all know that it's customary to make sure that a dead person has a knife with them. Anyway, the story of Rook and Faith is short, and unanswered variables will always haunt us. For example, who replaced Rook in Nick's game of Skiddly-Doop after Rook's death? Did Mayor Herc win the election? What was the real reason that Pastor Jerome wanted Faith drugged unconscious? I guess we'll never know.